This is the Observations Podcast for Sunday, the 10th of November, 2024. Welcome back to the podcast. I'm Dale Franks.
I'm Michael Wade.
And it's over. It took an hour after we got off the air on Tuesday, but they called Pennsylvania, at which point it was mathematically impossible for Kamala Harris to win the election. But not only did she not win, she lost bad. There was a clip on CNN, and we missed it because you and I were talking. But apparently Anderson Cooper was talking to their analyst, and he said, "Okay, here's a map of all the counties where Kamala Harris did better than Joe Biden."
That was Jake Tapper, not Anderson.
Was it? Oh yeah, Jake Tapper. You're right. It doesn't matter because the key line was really?
None?
Nothing?
Not even one?
Not even one. So at the moment, the House is still under discussion. It was looking like the Republicans were going to win it. But it may not actually work out that way.
It's very, very close calls in a couple places. California is the hard one because there's going to be a lot of representatives that are going to fill the House. California has something like 27 or 28.
What, representatives?
Yeah.
Try 52.
52. Okay. I thought they had dropped down a significant amount. Oh, I'm thinking of New York. New York dropped and Florida went up. I think Florida's at like 26, 27, something like that.
Right. And next census is going to be a bloodbath for the blue states, but.
Well, depending on how they count.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, there are still several votes out there. Matter of fact, I don't think Arizona has been called yet, has it?
House 6. Still waiting.
But not the Senate race.
Yeah, actually, the Senate race was called. It does not look like it's going to be possible for Kari Lake to win that race.
Okay.
It's not happening at this point. With 90% reporting, she just can't make up that 52,000 votes that she needs. They're just.
Yeah, it was at 60 yesterday. If she hasn't made it up, half of it up by today, there's not much hope.
Yeah, she's had a steady 50,000 vote deficit for the last 2 days. I am a little irked that it's Sunday and we're still talking about 90% reporting in from an election that was held on Tuesday. Hey, here's something. If you don't want people to question the legitimacy of your election system, count the votes. On the other hand, as good as she did, because 48.1 is about as good as Kari Lake has ever done. This is now the third time that she has lost an election in Arizona. The truth is she's just not that popular in Arizona. She's not well liked, and she doesn't have a lot of people who want her to be their representative. It's sad to say, but it's just that she's not the candidate for Arizona. This does not count as a seat flip, of course, because this was Kristen Sinema's seat, I believe. So it was still held by a Democrat. It's now still going to be held by a Democrat. So even though...
Although she was an independent, she did not caucus anymore. She quit caucusing with the Democrats.
Sure. Yeah. But she was elected as a Democrat. So during the election, she had a D after her name.
Yeah.
So, okay, fine. I never thought Kari Lake was going to win because I've seen how she did in her last 2 elections. For whatever reason, and I don't know all that much about Kari Lake, but for whatever reason, at the statewide level, she's just not a winner in Arizona. That's just
She's not appealed to the people at all.
yeah.
Well, at
Again,
all.
I don't know why
No.
because I don't know much about her. What I see of her, she seems relatively articulate and well spoken and all the other stuff. But it doesn't matter. This is the third time that she's run for statewide office in Arizona and is lost. So I think the verdict there is probably pretty clear. Now there's going to be some people who will talk about Arizona's cheating and how her the head of the elections in Maricopa County just really hates her and all of that other stuff. And look, if you want to not have people have an in-depth discussion about that, maybe count the votes, get them done. But I'm just sitting here looking at this. I don't think she's going to win, but it doesn't matter because we're still going to have 52 Republicans, and in Pennsylvania, which
53,
which by the way, Decision Desk still hasn't called. And Mark Elias is now in Pennsylvania doing everything he can in the courts.
For Bob Casey?
Yes, to force this into a recount. Good luck with that. At the end of the day, Dave McCormick won that race, and he's going to the Senate.
That was what the information I saw told me.
Yeah, AP has called it. AP has called it. Decision Desk hasn't. So, whatever their problem is, who knows? But we're going to have a Republican Senate. The House is going to be so close because there's already 216 Republicans. So what are the Democrats going to have? A one-seat majority, maybe? If they win, good luck governing on that. Good luck getting anything through. I think when you look at
the Republicans couldn't do it when they had the 4-seat, 5-seat majority in the House, and they couldn't get anything done.
Yeah, and by the way, Trump is talking about pulling people out of the House to fill executive posts.
Yeah.
That's not a great idea. However, there's only really two things we want to talk about. We've already been on the air for 4.5 hours this week, so we're not getting paid for this, people. So we're gonna keep this one a little shorter than normal. There are two things I want to talk about. Number one is the absolutely unhinged reaction in the media about Donald Trump's victory. And not just that he won, and that he won the popular vote, and that he got more than 300 electoral votes, and that they lost the Senate, and that even as we speak, there is still an excellent chance that they will lose the House. And the fact that Kamala Harris did worse in every single county in the country than Joe Biden did in 2020. Their response seems to be, we didn't call the American people racist enough.
Yeah, it's funny that they're doubling down on the miserable failure that they've had. And they've been talking about this for the last 20, 25 years. And this is where they went, and it's not working for people. I mean, in some ways, and I've heard this suggested by others, so I don't want to make this seem like it's like my original idea, but I've heard this from others that in some ways it worked out for Trump that you had Trump, then immediately Biden, and just, diametrically opposed ways of running the government. And having that real life comparison for a lot of people, I think, definitely opened some people's eyes. You see it out there. It's called getting red pilled. And I mean, maybe there's something to that. I would definitely agree that having a basic understanding of economics is helpful. But, I mean, most people just are trying to live day to day, right? And they see the grocery prices, they see the gas prices. They're like, damn it. Between 2016 and 2020, I could afford this stuff, and now I can't. What's going on here?
Yeah, most people are not ideological. They vote on largely personal reasons.
Right.
And the fact that Kamala Harris, and this is I forget who it was on TV, but they were saying Kamala Harris ran a nearly perfect campaign. If that was true,
I think it was Sunny Hostin.
Yeah, if that was true, she would have won.
Mm-hmm.
But if you think with these results that she ran a perfect campaign, please run her again in 2024 or 2028.
Right?
Please. There is,
Well, and they have a problem there, right? Who's on their bench?
well,
Pete Buttigieg?
J.D. Pritzker is talking about running.
I mean, they've got nobody with any real name recognition, any star power, anything.
Shapiro, maybe, Pennsylvania.
Shapiro could, yeah, he could be
it's
formidable.
But I don't care about 2028. That's 4 years from now. It is. I despise the fact that we live in a country where the presidential election begins the second it ends.
Yeah.
And so,
absolutely. No, you're absolutely right. Why does it matter? Why is it always the most important election in our lives? It should not make one iota of real difference to us. It should be that inconsequential. But because we have let the executive arrogate so much power to itself, and Congress is mostly to blame for this, right? I mean, shoving things over to the executive branch. It's made the election of the president way too important, and it shouldn't be important at all.
No, and that's why there is so much wailing and gnashing of teeth. That parenthetically, I wonder how much interest there is among Democrats now for getting rid of the filibuster and creating another 5 or 6 Supreme Court seats.
Yeah, what do you think?
I'm going to say their enthusiasm for that has waned substantially. We've talked a lot about how a lot of leftism really has begun to seem like a secular religion.
Yeah.
And one of the interesting things about religions is that they are immune to fact because they are faith-based. Right. And I don't think you could see a better indication of that than by watching the reaction and the analysis by professionals about why the Democrats lost. And their analysis has been, it's the Principal Skinner meme, right? Am I out of touch? No, it's the children who are wrong. And that has been the explanation. Are we out of touch? No, it's the people who are wrong.
Yeah, the voters. They don't know what they're doing. This is right back to, what was that book? What's the Matter with Kansas, right?
Yeah, why do you constantly keep voting against your own interest? It is inconceivable to them from from the point of view of religious orthodoxy that people may conceive of their interests differently than you do.
Mm-hmm.
And people may perceive that they have interests over and above the purely economic interests that you're talking about that are more important to them.
Well, especially when the push is things like climate change. Climate change? Well, of course climate changes. Duh. But it's getting warmer because we have SUVs. We know that that's not true. No, it's not real. And yet they keep trying to shove it down our throats. And we have to mouth all these platitudes. They, them, zer.
Yeah,
call yourself whatever the hell you want.
On MSNBC after the election, there was a guy who made the mistake of talking about, boys and girls or men and women.
Oh, Shermichael. Yeah. Shermichael.
And he was forced.
Singleton?
And he was forced to make a public obeisance for using the wrong terms. And had to be instructed as to what the proper terms were. I'm
not going to let you use a slur, man.
Yeah, people are tired of that. And people don't want to have that shoved in their face for whatever reason. Well, we all know the reason, because people don't think it's true. And people really object to being.
People know it's not true.
And people really object to being forced to basically lie publicly.
At least Americans do.
About these things.
We're pretty based when it comes
Americans,
to that.
Anyway. So if you don't, one of the things about the U.S. military, at least the one that I was in on active duty for 10 years, is that when something happens, you sit down and you write an after-action report. And you write what went well, and you write down what went wrong, and what the lessons learned are, and how you will change things the next time you do that. And without that ability to honestly self-criticize your own shortcomings and figure out how you can do things better, you won't.
Yeah, you have no institutional knowledge now.
And the Democrats are bound and determined to blame this on everything but themselves and their policies and the results that were felt by average American. And I think it's hilarious, the fact that Hispanic men voted for Trump by 55%. How
white women actually voted more for Trump than for the Democrats.
That is true.
I was actually really surprised about that.
Except for unmarried women. He still carries unmarried women.
Yeah.
I'm kind of curious as to how eager the Democrats are for more Hispanic immigration now that it turns out that the Hispanics may not be as a reliable Democratic constituency as
people have been saying that for years. Like, if they come in and they start voting for Republicans, you're not going to be so sanguine about having millions of illegal immigrants coming into the country every year.
Yeah, and by the way, so some of the analysis about Hispanics, again, NBC,
kind of racist, right?
CNN, yeah. How can these Hispanics vote for Donald Trump when he's going to deport their family members?
So everybody who's here of a Hispanic descent is now illegal? That makes no sense.
Yeah, I mean, it's galactically stupid. They are American citizens. And thus, they probably perceive that their interests lie more in the interests of their fellow citizens than people who just skipped across the border 6 weeks ago.
Yeah, the people I know who are naturalized citizens and went through years and tons of money.
Wait a second. Naturalized citizens, the vast majority of Hispanic citizens were born here.
Well, and there's also that. But the people who actually come here in a legal way are not real happy about this illegal migration crap. They feel cheated because they spent so much time dealing with the bureaucracy. And look, I'm the first one to say, we've talked about this before, I think the immigration system should be reformed greatly. And that, rain drain or whatever, I don't give a crap. If we can bring over great people here, let's do it.
And
why not?
And here's the thing. Americans are one of the most pro-immigration societies in the world. We only have a couple of demands: that the people we bring in here contribute, and that we can vet them before they come here so that we know who they are and what kind of person they're likely to be when they get here. And if we
don't want them to come over here being suckling on the tit.
Yeah, and if
we want them to come over and be part of the American culture.
Exactly. And as long as these immigrants from wherever they come from are willing to do that, we're a pretty welcoming country. That's not what we've been. So. That's not what we've been seeing with this wave of. And by the way, even though the Biden administration has done a hand-waving legal thing that has put a thin tissue of legality over their immigration here by making them, refugees.
Right.
They're still illegal.
They just changed the categories so that, now you're legal. even though we didn't get any permission from Congress to do any of that stuff.
Yeah, exactly. So, this there is gonna come a change, and they're not happy about what that change might look like. But the just the categorization of why would Hispanics vote for Trump when he's going to send Hispanics home? Because he's sending them.
Ones who are here legally.
Yeah, because he's sending them home, and because we were born here, nobody's talking about deporting us. We're actual citizens, and the fact that we share an immutable attribute. And by the way, it's not even an immutable attribute if you're Hispanic. It's largely a shared language, which is not, in fact, immutable. And the fact that he's going to send...
Indeed, it's very different between South America, Mexico, or Central America, and Spain. Even in Spain, you've got like three sort of different dialects.
Yeah, but it's just so fundamentally racist to assume that Hispanics are going to feel this, I don't know whether it's a cultural or racial or whatever affinity with other people simply because they come from a Spanish-speaking country. And so therefore they are locked together by bonds of fraternity that are fundamentally different than those they share with their fellow citizens. Yeah, it's a little racist.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's why expecting black people to all vote the same way, or women to all vote the same way, or whatever. I mean, it's you have to assume that every individual in that category that you've made up is exactly the same and has exactly the same thoughts and exactly the same worries. And we know that's not true.
Yeah, but that is the fundamental requirement of identity politics. Yeah. That we can put people into these cubby holes and that they're going to stay in those cubby holes like good little proles and they're never going to stray out of them. So when you get an election like this one and all of the things that they tried to do to disqualify Trump, all of the lawfare, which, by the way, we didn't have that on the agenda, but we probably need to talk about that a little bit. None of that worked. The American people decided that no matter what all of the legal issues or all of the other issues or what they were told by the media, and how much of it is that the American people have begun to realize that the media simply lies to them straight-faced. And can't be trusted.
We've seen the poll numbers, right?
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot going on under the surface. And if your analysis is it's the people who are wrong, well, good luck maintaining a political party in the future.
Right.
At least one that wins outside of the deepest blue urban areas.
Right. And that was interesting looking at those county by county maps. Even my Chris, I know your Chris is a big Fox News watcher too.
No, actually, she's not.
Well, my wife was, and she's now like, you can't trust any of these stations. Doesn't matter if it's left, right, whatever. You can't trust any of them. They are constantly telling you lies.
Look, Jonathan Chait pointed out.
True.
Jonathan Chait pointed this problem out like 5 or 6 years ago, which is that as soon as the networks decided that news was no longer a public service and that it had to be a revenue-generating entity just like everything else, and if it didn't revenue... Because for years, like CBS News, they would boast of the fact of how much money they lost of CBS News.
Yeah, it was called a loss leader.
Yeah, it was a cornerstone of public policy. Once that went away and we decided that news had to make money, as Jonathan Chait pointed out, then what we're going to do, the only way that we can make money is to capture an audience. And the only way that we can capture an audience is to tell them exactly what they want to hear every single day. And we will preach to the choir, and those will be the people who will support our advertisers. And so the entire news media kind of segregated into these little these little circles of epistemic closure, so that, if I am a young progressive, I'm going to turn on MSNBC, and I am going to see all of the progressive crap, and they're just going to fill my head with it and tell me that I'm right. And Fox News or Newsmax, you're going to get the right or righter set of views, and that's all you're ever going to hear on those channels. We're just going to narrowcast to a band of people. And look, Fox has been successful at it, because if you're a progressive,
they were first entering into a very liberal, actually completely liberal space. So yeah, they were a first mover.
Yeah, so they're the 800-pound gorilla in cable news, simply because they were the only ones who were giving an alternative point of view. Nevertheless, we're not getting news. We're not being told the truth. No. And it doesn't matter who you watch. That's the thing.
That's right.
If somebody is in front of a camera in a studio in New York, you might as well just assume that they're lying to you, or at the very least shading the truth in a way that you'll find palatable.
They're giving you part of the story, if they're giving you any of the story.
And so, that.
But this is why, like, podcasts and, like Joe Rogan, Adam Carolla. I mean, this is why they're so popular. And that's just a couple. There are lots of them out there. They're very popular people out there telling their message, but they're not pretending they don't have some bias. They're pretty open about it. I mean, we're open about it even here, right? So you can believe us or not. You can argue with us or not, whatever. But at least we're not trying to pretend that we're somehow in the middle of everything and that we have a completely...
Yeah, we don't do objective biased journalism.
No.
And you know what? Neither does anyone else. And one of the things about the podcasting thing, which I think is so fundamentally different, and it's because you don't get to see it anywhere else, is the fact that if you walk onto Joe Rogan, you can count on being there for at least 2 hours. And by the way, the same is true with Lex Fridman. Adam Carolla has a much more tightly controlled show because he runs his show
commercially supported.
Yeah, he runs his show more like a traditional entertainment show.
Yeah.
But you don't walk onto most podcasts without being willing to sit down without notes, without help, without a lifeline to your friend. They're just going to talk to you for 2 hours. And
that reminds me, we need to bring a guest back on. We haven't done that in a while.
Yeah, no, maybe we could call up Jim Lakely or somebody like that and get them.
Yeah, Jim or actually, you know who we should have on is what's his name? Protein Wisdom.
By the way, excuse me, Fox Watcher. Them is fighting words, Michael. That comes from Chris in chat. Yeah, Fox lost a lot of viewers because they went squishy.
In 2020, they lost a lot. I mean, they dropped precipitously there for a while, but I hadn't been really watching them since then. I already know what they think. It's I'm not learning anything.
Yeah, that's the trouble.
And
you can't really. For me, I can't watch the news anymore. The news, because I already know what I'm going to hear, no matter what I watch. So
even the local news. I mean, I'll listen to the local news just because. Kind of want to know who got shot where and whatever. I mean, I know I'm only getting half the story. I mean, it's like reading Pravda, right? It's I see the part here where they didn't mention anything about something I would expect them to mention. Well, okay, I'm going to fill in the blanks then. That's sort of how you have to take it. But at least with local news, I know the neighborhoods, I know the people, so I have a better understanding. National news, international news, I don't even read from America. We don't have any desks anymore internationally. I get it all from like France and Germany and Britain and
Yeah, same thing.
India.
Same thing. If I want to see what's going on overseas, I'll tune into France 24 or Deutsche Welle. I'm not a big fan of the BBC, but their foreign coverage, I mean,
It's pretty good. At least they have
exists.
correspondents on the ground.
Yeah.
Uh,
So,
Sky News is pretty good. Australia and New Zealand are actually pretty good. Singapore's not bad,
yeah, but
but
our news media sucks. And that's the trouble is all of these political people that we've been seeing, analyzing this election, they've all been analyzing it on the mainstream news with
yeah,
mainstream news people. And oddly enough, they all come up to the same conclusion. It's the people
right.
who are wrong.
Well,
And
I loved how Ace put it the other day. It's like they're not the mainstream. We're the mainstream. We're the popular vote, right? We just voted popularly to reelect Trump. Okay, so they're not the mainstream. They represent the political class, and that's all they
and
represent.
that's
That's all the
exactly it.
the only people they care about.
And it doesn't matter whether it's Newsmax or Fox News or MSNBC or CBS. They
That's right,
all are
because they
talking.
all go to the same cocktail parties, don't
They're
they?
they're all talking to the same political class.
Yep.
And so basically, you have, depending on who's in power, basically a state media and then a controlled state opposition media. And whichever they are switches back and
The
forth
shadow
depending on.
bench,
Yeah,
right?
I mean, it's watching the television news is pointless. So, two things. Let's talk about Trump and what to look forward to. Number one, from the legal side, um, the federal cases are dead, right?
Right.
I mean, they're dead as fried
Yes.
chicken. So, my question
We
is
already saw Jack. What's his face?
Jack Smith. Yeah, he's out of a job.
Smith. Yeah, he's out of a job. He knows that he's shutting down the cases, and that's well established DOJ policy.
So that
So
leaves us
that's
with
over.
New York and Georgia, more precisely
Which already
Manhattan
have.
and Fulton
So
County.
Georgia has not progressed any further. You have
No,
the two New York cases, and those have already been decided, but they're at the appellate level almost. So the one with Alvin Bragg was the 34 felony counts, I believe.
right. That's already been through oral arguments at the New York Court of Appeals.
And he's already, well, only part of it that was interlocutory. But there's a motion pending from Trump before, what's his name? Merchant,
Yeah.
which the motion is to dismiss based on the ruling from the Supreme Court about immunity and blah 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 blah. So I don't know that that's going to last. They're going to find a way to get rid of it because it was lawfare to begin with. It doesn't stand on good.
Well, look, the New York Court of Appeals in their questioning of the prosecution made it pretty clear that they were kind of iffy on the basis for a felony case anyway.
Yeah, and it's especially the way they went about it. So
However,
there's that one.
we still have a November 27th sentencing date for Trump.
It's really interesting to see how that's going to work.
I mean, ideally, the New York Court of Appeals would just come in and say, "Yeah, we're
Yeah,
overturning
no,
the case."
stop it.
Yeah, I mean, ideally, but it's Manhattan, and I wouldn't expect a decision from the Court of Appeals until after the new year, at least.
I think they'll delay everything for as long as possible. I wouldn't be surprised for Merchant to move, or not Merchant. No, that's Merchant, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, that's Merchant. I wouldn't be surprised. He's already canceled all of the. Um, oh no, 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 that's Chuckin that canceled all the dates. Merchant has delayed this ruling a couple times already, and I wouldn't be surprised if he moves it past January 20th, and so they can just drop it.
Yeah, so they don't want to drop it. What they wanted was to be able to have Trump disqualified in the minds of the American
Yeah.
people by saying he's convicted of 34 felonies. And I think, honestly, the New York Court of Appeals is just going to overturn that conviction anyway, based on the attitudes that were on display. Because, I mean, they were just
Well,
like,
the complete unfairness of the
yeah.
trial.
I mean,
When you're adjudged guilty before a jury is even sat, no, that doesn't even make any sense.
yeah, well, again, Manhattan, what are you going to do? But I think, that certainly the
Although
federal stuff goes away.
Trump
The
did
state
cut
stuff should go away.
I mean, the Trump, he lost by like 10%, I think, in 10 points in New York. That's about as close as anybody since Reagan.
Yeah. I saw a map earlier this week of all of the counties in the United States with the little red and blue arrows about whether they moved
Yeah, right.
left or right. There's a hell of a lot of red arrows on that map. And
Yeah.
yeah, Trump basically outperformed.
He
Well,
outperformed 2016,
yeah, we don't.
2020.
Yeah, let's not talk about
He
2020
was
because that
all
was
in.
so. 2020 was just weird. But let's talk 2016. He was so much closer in 2016. Even in California, he did better. There was several counties in California that flipped red this time.
All the Western ones or
Yeah.
Eastern ones.
Yeah, all the eastern ones where no one lives because it's the middle of the desert, but still, he flipped them red. More interesting to me, however, has been the videos that Trump has been releasing about what his agenda is going to be. And they're all on X if you want to go take a look at them. And we're not going to listen to them because there's about 20 minutes of video here. The first one is 7 minutes. The second one is 4 minutes. So that's 11 minutes. And then there's another one here that's 3.5 minutes and another that's 3 minutes. So there's about 20 minutes of these videos. And each one of these videos, Trump is talking about a particular subject and what he plans to do. Number one is his free speech thing. He's asking Congress to write a law to make it illegal for anyone in the government to even contact a tech company or social media company to even report what they think are terms of service. No backdoor censorship by terms of service violations.
Rand Paul will be on board with that.
And
Actually, so will Ron Wyman.
And he's talking about making it a felony if they attempt to do so. And he's also saying, as far as big tech goes, and this is probably one where we might have a long discussion if we were going to have a long podcast. He's also talking about changing Section 230 to require things like YouTube and X and whatever, Facebook, Threads, whoever, to have open and enforceable standards of fairness and neutrality when it comes to user content and user moderation.
That one worries me a little bit. I got to be honest.
Yeah, because we're getting government now.
It sounds like a cudgel when you're thinking of it, from your free speech rights, but it's also a cudgel from the other side. And I don't really want anybody deciding, what I can say and what I can't say.
Right. But, it's this eternal argument. You have it's not a strike, but we still have a warning on our channel because me reading directly from a federal court opinion
Right. Yeah,
was
yeah.
a violation of YouTube's terms of service on harmful conduct or harmful content. I have, and there's no way to appeal that, right? I mean, I filed an appeal and it took like 10 seconds for an email to come back that says your appeal has been denied. Okay, don't tell me that a person looked at that and made that decision. That didn't happen. Um, there is a fundamental unfairness in the way that content is moderated. And a good portion of that unfairness comes from the fact that they're just simply doing it with bots, with AI. And AI is just often wrong. And how wrong it is and the direction in which the wrongness tends to go is largely based on the type of training that you give the AI. So if you give it biased training, it's going to make biased decisions.
Garbage in, garbage out. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know what these fair and transparent standards of neutrality would be. From a philosophical point of view, I think we would want social media platforms to have some sort of attitude of neutrality when it comes to political speech. It's getting government involved in writing the details of that are
That's what makes it very scary.
scary to me. Because as soon as government gets involved, things get messed up. However, what government? Because Trump's next thing is, here's what we're going to do. We're going to get rid of the deep state. First thing we're going to do is I am going to, by executive order, give myself back the power to fire bureaucrats who don't do what they're told. Tenure and whatever notwithstanding. Second of all, we don't need all these people in Washington, D.C. And so he said,
That would be a great idea.
just as I moved the Department of the Interior out to Colorado, I'm gonna start. He says, I've found 100,000 positions in the federal government that can be moved out of Washington, D.C. Although 100,000 is a very small number, even for Washington, D.C. Nevertheless,
well, I know that Maryland's super worried about it.
And so should Northern Virginia.
Parts of Northern Virginia are very worried about it. Because, look, why is the Department of Agriculture in D.C.? Why isn't it in Nebraska or Kansas
or Iowa
or somewhere? Right? I mean, it would just make much more sense that it'd be closer. Why is the Department of the Interior not in Colorado or Arizona or New Mexico? I mean, that's where most of the federal lands are, is out west. So let's put these agencies where they're closest to the thing that they regulate. You know, the Department of Fisheries, we could have two of them, right? One down in like Savannah or maybe North Carolina, another one on the West Coast out of San Francisco or a little bit south of there.
or
There you go.
Merced or Point Loma. Uh, the FBI needs to be more
If you wanted to be really happy, yeah.
The FBI needs to
not be able to afford anything.
Yeah, the FBI needs to be more in the center of the country because they're.
Why is it not in Chicago or St. Louis
or Billings, Montana, wherever? The thing is, get them out of Washington, D.C.
That's absolutely right. Yeah, let's thin out D.C. and stop making this, Rome. I mean, this is what I don't want to go into the deep dive on his story.
Oh, by the way, he also wants term limits on the House and Senate.
Well, you need a.
He says he's going to propose a constitutional amendment for it.
That's the only way to do it. Although there was a state, Maryland, I think, voted to have for at least state representatives or state senators. They passed some internal law to term limit in the very least, representatives, they have a two house. Yeah, they have bicameral. Um, yeah, I think Maryland now has, you know, term limits on some of their state Congress critters. Uh, and that seems to be, if that happened in Maryland, I wouldn't be surprised to see it other places. So if Trump can get that on the agenda, I mean, it's a bold move. I wouldn't mind it.
Yeah, it is a bold move. He's also talking about, well, and this is more of a culture war thing. There was one other thing that he was going to do that I should have written it down, and I didn't write notes on it, but it was in the deep state thing. Um,
Well, he's talking about deporting
yeah, well,
like
he's also
20
talking
million
about
people.
deporting 20 million people. He's also talking about taking away your federal funding if you teach transgender stuff in schools. Um, uh,
That's a DeSantis move.
yeah, he wants a bill that says there'll only be two genders. Also, that was
Yeah,
the
I
thing
saw
I
that.
wanted. That
Right.
was the
Yeah,
thing I
yeah.
wanted. He wants a federal law that requires that you show a photo ID for any federal election.
Hmm.
Now, that is interesting, and I don't believe it's unconstitutional or requires a constitutional change.
Well, that's what I was just trying to think of, and I don't think it's unconstitutional. But do I want that? I think I do, but I
I
don't.
I think I do
I,
too.
I I haven't thought about it enough.
Yeah, but I think I do too. If you want to vote in a federal election, you need a photo ID. And we can use your driver's license or any other photo ID. As long as we can identify you, you can vote in a federal election, which, by the way, would automatically just overturn laws like in California, which make it actually illegal for poll workers to ask you for an ID or indeed to even look at your ID.
But there are also places like California, New York, DC that allow you to get a driver's license if you're an illegal immigrant.
Yeah, that's true. So now, how do we fix that hole? Do we issue a federal identity card? I'm not going to be super happy with that
I wouldn't like that.
because now the
I
feds,
mean, and in some ways, I guess that's what a passport is, but
well, that is true. The passports do that. But I
it
have,
just seems kind of burdenous, and
but
I
again,
don't see
but
where the
again,
federal government has that power.
but again, if you want to have reliable elections and you want to have control over who actually votes, how do you do it without some voter ID law?
Well, I mean,
The trouble is, if you
Trump
do it
tried
at
to
the
do it.
trouble is if you do it at the federal level, that almost implies that you're going to have to create some sort of federal ID.
Yeah, I'm not sure I like that.
Yeah, because the feds don't issue IDs, well, other than passports, right? And you have to have a passport. Most Americans don't because most Americans don't ever leave the country. Um,
Right.
but now, now there is a database of all 230 million Americans with our photo ID there. I can't think of any reason how or any way in which that might be abused in the future. So, because
Yeah, that wouldn't
usually
be a
it's
problem.
it's states that give out IDs.
Well,
Right?
that's right,
The
because
feds are not in the giving out ID business.
well, they don't have general police power. The only reason that you need a passport is because we are a federal entity. So we have a statehood. And in order to go into another statehood, you need to have some sort of thing that says you are who you say you are.
Right. Well, as inebriated
But as you
Plutarch,
pointed out, I mean, most people don't even leave the United States
as
who are in the United
right,
States.
as inebriated Plutarch points out, well, we have real ID in place. We might be able to shoehorn something into that. Now, that actually probably would work Because in order, again, starting next year, if you want to fly anywhere or anything, you're going to need a real ID.
I just got my real ID.
So if you're in California and you're an illegal immigrant and you get a driver's license, you don't get a real ID. You can't get a real ID.
Right.
So just showing your driver's license.
You're not supposed to be able to get one.
Yes. Technically, you legally, you're not able to get one. Whether that's practically true, I'm not entirely sure. But all these things sound good, but then we start thinking about, okay, what are the actual practicalities of imposing?
Yeah, that's where I get kind of caught up.
Yeah. What if we're going to impose a fair and transparent system of neutrality on social media publishers? What does that mean? How do we do that?
And who gets to make the decisions? I mean, that's always what it comes down to, right?
Yeah.
I'm not comfortable with the idea of any agency or bureaucratic entity having control over that. I think that would be extremely violative of our First Amendment rights. And the reason that I think First Amendment rights are so important is because we need to be able to think freely. If we can't do that and we can't express those thoughts, well, that's the first way. This is why the left tries so hard to control language, right?
Yeah, well, look, let's go back here. Let's take a listen to just the first little bit of this free speech thing.
If we don't have free speech, then we just don't have a free country. It's as simple as that. If this most fundamental right is allowed to perish, then the rest of our rights and liberties will topple, just like dominoes, one by one. They'll go down. That's why today I'm announcing my plan to shatter the left-wing censorship regime and to reclaim the right to free speech for all Americans.
That sounds great. That's the bit I'm 100% behind.
Absolutely.
Every word that he just said is true. Then you follow that up with, and I need to
how he's going to do it.
And I need to create a government agency to oversee.
Yeah, that's what I don't like.
Okay, but if the government agency can do that, can't they also turn into a tyrannical agency if somebody else
if they
is
can,
president?
free it up, that means they can also close it down. And that's what I don't like.
That's the devil with all these things. Everything that Trump says that he's going to do is stuff that we've been talking about for years. Move the federal government out of. The only thing Trump has not said that I wish he would say is we're going to, and he has actually hinted around this, is that we are going to get rid of the 17th and 16th Amendment.
And the 16th Amendment, yeah. He was talking about getting rid of the income tax in favor of just straight up tariffs. It's an interesting idea.
It's an interesting idea. It's impossible. You're not going to fund $6.6 trillion in spending with tariffs. It's just never going to happen.
Well, but I think that's the point. It's that you're not gonna have that kind of spending. It's a sort of a Coolidge and who was his Treasury Secretary?
Then bye Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid.
They would have to be brought in line. The thing is, people of my generation and probably the people at the end of your generation, although I've always affectionately called you an honorary member of the Gen X generation, we don't expect anything, right? So, what are we actually giving up? The thing that we weren't going to get anyway? Okay. If that means that you'll have to stop taxing my children, you know what? I think I could make that trade.
Well, I think
I could.
I think the only way that we could actually do this in the least disruptive way possible would be to repeal the 16th Amendment and at the same time implement a VAT, probably around a 20% VAT. I think that'd be the only way that
we may have to do that, but
tariffs are not going to do it.
tariffs alone, well, especially the way that uh, Trump wants to do them.
Yeah, tariffs aren't even going
You're
to
right.
cover the discretionary budget. Never mind the
Right,
$4.4 trillion in the mandatory spending.
But let's say we get it down to 3 trillion or 3.5 trillion. We do have to pay for military. So, or maybe just under 4 trillion. All right. So 4 trillion, we're at about 8 right now.
6 point. Last year it was about $6.4 trillion.
Okay. So we're trending towards 7. If we could cut 2 trillion out of the budget, we'd be back on a growth model. I think there's 2 trillion we could cut out of the budget.
Well, I'm sure that there is. Cutting, all of the executive departments by half might be a good start.
Absolutely.
But we'll see. I mean, the only question I think that remains outstanding in my mind, and he talks like he has addressed this question internally as well, which is, did he learn any lessons from 2016? That
You mean Trump?
Yeah, Trump. Does he have a better sense of what the problem is? Does he have
He seems to understand that the personnel is much more important. He was overly reliant on DC insiders the first time around, and he tried to pick DC outsiders. He picked Rex Tillman, for
Tillerson.
his Tillerson for his was it not Department of Commerce, Department of State, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was Secretary of State.
It was an interesting choice. He certainly has, plenty of contacts around the world. Not a great choice, and Tillerson just started working against him from day one. So he had a lot of personnel problems. He brought in that idiot.
You say Tillerson started working against him from the day one. How much of that was Rex Tillerson, and how much of that is the institution of the State Department telling Rex Tillerson
That's
how
a fair
wrong
point.
Donald
Yeah,
Trump
that's
was?
a fair point.
That's the problem. One of the things that I learned in watching, all 5 series of Yes Minister and Yes Prime Minister is, we talk about the deep state, and we talk about it as if it's a sinister cabal. It's not a cabal. It's the normal operation of bureaucrats in a system who have an institutional point of view. And
Right.
Ministers, or in our case, cabinet secretaries, are these temporary figures who are going to come and go, while the actual State Department employees are there for 40 to 60 years. And getting anything done through that sort of resistance is hard, which I think is one of the reasons why Trump has said, I need to be able to fire bureaucrats who don't do what I tell them to do, because we have to enforce this idea that whoever runs the government calls the shots, and the executive agencies can no longer call the shots. And look, if he can make that happen, great.
It's a big if, right?
It's a big if. So now we've
But
got
I think
a
that's
lot
the
of big.
one thing he learned was that this was an important area to take care of. I thought it was interesting that his first choice was his chief of staff, and she's apparently quite a meticulous and steadfast person, which sounds right in his world. That's who he generally picks to be his closest advisors. So I'm not surprised about that, but I think it's interesting that was his first pick. This is going to be my person at the White House.
Well, he's saying a lot of the right things, but the devil, as they say, is always in the details. And so
Absolutely.
in the weeks and 2 months to come, maybe 3 months after he takes over, we're going to start seeing those details, and I imagine that there'll be much for us to discuss. For right now, though, I think we're done. We gave it a good hour. Our fifth hour.
Yeah, we have.
week.
Yeah, I was going to say we put in above and beyond this week.
We've put in the time. So, Michael, have a great week. We'll talk to you
All right,
next
buddy.
time.
Love
And
you.
for everybody else, you also have a great week, and we'll talk to you again next week too. Until then, so long.